I find that actually the most emotional pieces that I've ever performed are with the robot.
Oh, wow.
And it's because when I dance with a human, I see you, I feel you, we're connecting in that level. But when it's with the robot, I go super like very personal because it can be a reflection, it can be a mirror, it can be memories, it can be someone who's passed away, who's really close to me that like everything that I've wanted to be saying to this person, it can be all of that in the dance.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle Walgren, and this is another episode of the Business of Education. Today, my guest doesn't only hold a PhD in atomic and laser physics, she's also a professional ballerina. She has a degree in physics from Harvard, showcasing her academic excellence alongside of her artistic achievements. She was also recognized as the Forbes 30 under 30. A little jealous, not going to lie. Dr. Merritt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you for jumping on. When my team first pitched this at me, I was like, how's this fall in line? But then the more that I read on your background, I found it so fascinating. For those that don't know you, can you give us just a brief history on your journey to where you're at today?
Yeah, so the brief history is I started dancing around 13, so I was told I would never make it professionally. I loved math and science, so I was like, that's fine. I've got another passion. So I pursued that. Went to Harvard for physics. But while I was at Harvard, there were opportunities to perform. I got the dancer bug. I auditioned and trained like crazy and auditioned a number of companies, got into Zurich Ballet. To my parents' dismay, I got in. They're like I remember calling on my dad and be like, Dad, I got into Zurich Ballet. He's like, I know, I heard the bad news. It was just like, oh my God, like ballet, like why? Um, then I went back to Harvard, went to Boston Ballet, went back to Harvard, did my PhD while I was there, took time off to dance with English National. So I kept jumping back and forth between physics and dance. At some point, though, I was like, why am I'm having spending so much time hiding from the physics world that I dance and hiding from the dance world that I do physics. I also need to sleep more. Let's just try to combine them. And now I've gone down and been dancing with robots and now professor at NYU Abu Dhabi teaching courses on robotics and quantum and just having fun.
It sounds like you're definitely having fun. Usually when people select a path, especially one that takes as much dedication as I'm assuming ballet would, they don't just kind of happen into it. You know, it's not something they do on a whim. That's very planned out. How
Yeah.
surprised were you when you got the call and they're like, "Hey, you're going to do this with us"?
Oh, I didn't believe it. I didn't tell anyone for months until I actually was in Zurich. I'd taken a flight in Zurich and was like in the class that day because I was like, they're gonna, I don't know, I've signed a contract, but they're just gonna take it away. Like, I don't know, I'm still dreaming. Like, this isn't real. And it was a lot of hard work. I kind of, I'm like, oh, I just tried. And I did try, but I was only throughout my years at Harvard, you would only find me in the physics lab or the dance studio. That was it.
Yeah, and it's not like physics is a small hill to climb, right? Like that's a pretty
No, yeah.
full-time class. You know, you're all in. What took you down that path? You know, that's not an easy task to take physics, especially at a university like Harvard.
It was definitely daunting when I show up and to all these like physics Olympiads and like the caliber and the level of the students around me were exceptional. I think that I give a lot of credit to my parents for just giving me um I think they worked really hard in giving my sister and I the confidence in math and science. I went down the math science path. My sister went down kind of more government path, but um yeah, my dad would like, it was a game as a kid. Like we would do math flashcards and it was just a party. Like, we'd see how many math flashcards I could get through in a minute. And then, at the end, it was like, no matter how many I got through, it was like we were jumping on the bed and the Great Danes were howling. And it was just like, it was a fiesta. And so I just grew up being like, math is a party. Like math is really fun. And it continued, and the fact that physics has applications to the real world, but also is so mysterious and weird. It just, I just fell in love with it.
How did you align ballet and physics? Like, I'm sure there's some way that somebody like yourself, when you're in the middle of it, that it all makes sense and aligns together. But to somebody that doesn't understand either, because I feel like math is one of the most important things in the world, but I couldn't tell you the first line of physics or anything about
Yeah, it was super helpful, and it took me a couple years to realize like all the physics classes that I've been in were so helpful for dance. And there is a part where I'm like, I don't know if I would have made it as a professional ballet dancer without the physics because I didn't have that much time. And so I had to have like an intuitive understanding of torque and angular momentum and projectile motion and center of mass. And so there are aspects where I just thought it was intuitive until I saw, I don't know, there was a video about explaining the fouette with physics and angular momentum that went viral. And people were like, wow, I didn't realize it was like this. And I was like, oh, like this isn't going through everyone's brain like, when they're doing the fouette. Like that was kind of mind boggling for me. I was like, oh, I thought this was like what everyone thought about it when we did the fouette.
it. I'm on your website right now and I'm looking at these pictures and they're absolutely amazing, but you're literally dancing with robots.
Yeah, I do dance with robots. It's very fun. And I
The
dance with robots around the world. It's great.
is this something, obviously, the robots are programmed or trained to what is going to happen on their half, but like what's it like dancing with somebody that is going to be perfect and there's room for
Oh,
error on the human component?
oh, constantly, constantly. It's like the number of takes, because I used to do videos, like short little videos during the pandemic. I was like, the number of takes we have to take because I've messed up is just mind-boggling. But it's really it's the same because I'm trained as a ballet dancer, and so for core work, we all have to work together, and you just learn to kind of have eyes. We all work together, so you in a way, as you're dancing and thinking about all your corrections, you're constantly thinking, looking at who's in front of you, who's behind you, and who's at the side, so that we're all together.
Right.
And so working with the robot, it's similar in the sense that I'll be next to it, him, her, however you want to say, and sort of like it's the same skill. You're like, oh, okay, like because I can't know it's programmed on timing, sometimes in seconds, and or it's mainly me feeling where it is to get
Do
it
you
really in sync.
I feel like one of the things, and I'm fascinated, like on America's Got Talent and stuff like that. When
Mm-hmm.
people like dance or sing, it just like blows my mind to see the amount of
Mm-hmm.
talent that these
Mm-hmm.
people have, because I understand how hard of work they have to put in order to maintain that ability. Yes, there's a God given grace that you get, but if you don't put the work in, it
Yeah.
doesn't pan out. So to watch it's just like amazing, but there's so much emotion in it. When your
Mm.
partner becomes a robot,
Mm.
how do you maintain that emotion in the piece, knowing that there is no emotion coming from your partner?
Good question, and it's been a interesting revelation for myself because I find that actually the most emotional pieces that I've ever performed are with the robot.
Oh, wow.
And it's because when I dance with a human, I see you, I feel you, we're connecting in that level. But when it's with the robot, I go, super like very personal because it can be a reflection, it can be a mirror, it can be memories, it can be someone who's passed away, who's really close to me that like everything that I've wanted to be saying to this person, it can be all of that in the dance. And so the dances end up being really personal and really special, and it's like a way of expressing something that I couldn't possibly express with a human. And not that I don't like dancing with humans. It's just it's another tool to for me.
That's interesting. It's almost like you get to be greedy or selfish in that moment
Hmm.
and really use it to explain something that you want to get out instead of having to worry about what your partner is trying to explain in that
Yeah,
moment as well. I never thought
exactly.
of that. That's super interesting. Do you get to do the programming behind the robot and everything else too, or?
I'm doing everything. Do everything from programming to organizing the transport to putting it together to dragging it upstairs to pulling it down, like dragging 16-foot ladders to like fix some light. Like it is. It's been a one man and one robot show for a while. Yeah, the
and
programming, all of it. Yeah.
and you travel and you get to do this quite often.
Yeah, like this year has been amazing. It started off at the World Economic Forum in Davos, then in Mexico in front of 5,000 people, then in National Theater of Belgrade, then Colorado. It's been really fun.
You mentioned the World Economic Forum. What's it like performing to a group of people like that where you feel like you're sitting in the room with maybe the smartest people in the world?
Yeah, that was daunting. Well, especially that performance in particular, because I was supposed to have it in the morning. I was performing that night. And so I had a full morning to program it, rehearse it, and right, because I didn't have the robot before.
Hmm.
And like they needed the sniffer dogs to make sure it wasn't a bomb, and then the
Oh
sniffer
wow, I
dogs had to
bet.
go on a lunch break, and so the robot didn't arrive till like 2, and I was on stage at 6. So it was a very yes, it was a very stressful day. Let's put it that way.
The Yeah, I guarantee it. I could only imagine the environment or the energy around that place. You know, these are people that are ultimately making decisions of what or how our future
Hmm.
of the world is supposed to look
Yeah,
and function. So I can imagine the energy in that room being completely different than going to, a show in Boston and dancing
yeah,
for, people that typically come there and align with what dancing is, and they're there because it's
right.
something that's passionate to them. But you've recently also were a guest or a competitor on Astronauts Do You Have What It Takes for the BBC. What was that
Yeah,
experience like?
that was that was something else. It was a, I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. It was the combination of like the stress, the pressure, the adrenaline. I mean, it was an intensity of like emotions. And I would sign up again. Like if she asked me to, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it again. They had the astronaut Chris Hadfield leading the program, and his philosophy around it, and we really felt it was like anyone who goes through this, I want them to be able to put it on the resume for when they apply to be an astronaut. So it was like the first day they had us in a helicopter. Like you're meant to go through weeks of simulation before you get into the helicopter, and they had us going in, and they're like, now try to hover it. I don't. It's a helicopter is something else. Also, when you're being filmed and mic'd up, and we're all we were all athletic dorks, let's put it that way. Like some had been a bobsledding team for the Olympics, and but also had a master's, and one was a dentist but had gone to Mount Everest like 7 times. So we all were not used to being filmed and then being thrown into tasks where we're like in a capsule going underneath, flipped underwater, and you have to break through the window and come out and say your coordinates. It was just, but the part that was hardest was you never knew what was going to come next.
Hmm.
And so we'd all be thinking what was coming next, and the ideas that went around were more stressful than the actual practice. But it was phenomenal, and um, the best part of it was it got me really thinking, like, wow, like what does the future look like, and what does the future in space look like? And then it kind of led me to like, oh, what does the future of human machine interaction look like? Which kind of led me to the robots.
Over the last, um, I've just started following like the whole space exploration
Mm-hmm.
stuff just recently. I'm an Elon Musk fan, so the
Yeah,
more that he talks about it, the more fascinating I get. But I'm going to say about maybe a year ago ish, there was, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and Elon all sending, ships into space. Richard
yeah,
Branson went into
yeah,
space. With the advances, do you think that it's going to become easier for people to become astronauts? Like,
yeah,
what do you think that journey
100%.
looks like?
Oh, I think it's going to be fascinating. And I don't, so y- one thing was, so there's this billionaire, Yusaku Maezawa, who wanted to take 8 artists to go around the moon. And there had been a million applications. And I got down to the final 16.
Oh wow.
I wasn't the final eight, but it was an indication of like, wow, we're that close where he wants to take like 8 artists to go around the moon. The whole mission unfortunately got canceled like last month, so no one's going around. But I think that like it's so close. It's so like it's here. It's we're in that era. If we want to, I think it would if they keep going on the track that they're going on. I think it'll be many, and I think right now many people are going up that we don't even know have gone up. That's the
Right.
crazy part, right? Like they're
The
not even making news.
there's so many rockets that go into space now, and like I follow Elon Musk, so I hear
Hmm.
hear him post about it more. But you know that Richard Branson's company Virgin and
Yeah.
Blue Oracle, is it Blue Oracle,
Origin.
Blue Origin, they've got to be sending ships up as well too, right? So
Yeah, they
like
are, and mainly people have gone up, and we don't even hear about them.
don't
Like
even hear
it
about it
doesn't even make the news. That's how
before
kind of.
before when they sent astronauts into space, the schools would shut down, and or else they'd stream it in class, and now they don't even talk about it. It's
Yeah.
how much it's changed. I would have never asked the question, how do you think AI is going to affect dancing, until I seen you dance with the robot. But how do you see AI being implemented in dancing now, seeing that how you're doing it?
There's gonna be, and this is why I love this. It's such a unknown unknown, right? Well, I could see it definitely happening. Like I was just helping behind the scenes at the Olympics, and you can see where AI is being used to try to enhance, you know, athleticism, what they eat, how they train, form, technique. And so for dance, that's also one way of using AI. The reason I actually entered this was I watched the documentary AlphaGo, and
Okay.
where you had the AI machine against the human, Lee Sedol playing the game Go that's existed for 2,000 years. And the amazing, oh, the part that really intrigued me was how the commentators were saying, oh, they were saying things like, "Oh, what a creative move! Like we've never seen a move like this before, even though humans have been playing it for 2,000 years." And the aftermath of that, a bunch of people trained using the AI and their ability to be way more creative in their moves was like accelerated tremendously. So I was like, "Oh, like what if we could use AI as a creative tool to help with choreography, or there are these things called GANs, like generative adversarial networks, where you'll get these images, which is a combination of like a bird, a water, and a cloud." I was like, but what if you could like use the expertise of flamenco and hip hop and ballet to create new choreography? So there are lots of areas that I think will be used in the form of dance, and I'm excited.
The AI has been dramatically changing everything on how all of us use it. It just depends if you're willing to adopt it or not. I'm not. I don't consider myself an athlete, but I like to golf, and I use an AI golf training program
You
that's
do? Interesting.
tremendously, like, it measures your swing and tells you how your approach is and everything. And it's helped me. This morning I, I go out early morning,
Hmm.
and I was like, wow, I can actually hit the ball a lot better since I started listening to this
Really?
program. And it just was like simple stuff on like how your club angle is laying on the
Oh,
ground, and how the ball comes off depending on the angle of your club face, whether it's
yeah,
flat or toe up or heel down. And it changed a lot, just made me look at the game a little bit different. And I'm not a good golfer at all. Like I shoot in the 90s, so it's not like, you know what I mean? So I could only imagine somebody that's a professional in their sport
yeah,
when technology points something out that they may not have been noticing happening,
right,
and how fast they can correct that error and how much that'll advance their careers. So I can see 100 different ways in how it could work, and just measuring, like maybe even measuring flexibility and seeing how much
yeah,
more somebody could do something without them being hurt, right? And it training with them. What are some of your thoughts and roles on how machine learning could be used in younger dancing, and how could it help to influence young dancers to maybe come to the sport a little bit quicker?
interesting. I hadn't thought about like for young dancers entering. I mean, I'm sure it could be used sort of in a similar way of pointing out errors that maybe they can't see themselves and they don't have access to as many coaches and teachers. And there's a way that like those things could be pointed out.
The reason,
Um,
let me give you
yeah.
context to why I'm asking that, and it might help. I've got 4 kids. I'm a father of 4,
Hmm.
and when I played hockey at a young age, and I did make it fairly far in hockey, but I walked to the skating rink every day after school, and I went and practiced, and I played hockey every day. And I'm sure as yourself as a little
Mm,
girl, that's what you did. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Whether you were stretching or training or whatever, you spent hours and hours doing that. Now I look at my kids, and they spend hours playing video games. And when you get
Mm,
them
yeah.
outside, they love playing baseball, or cheerleading, or just depending
Yeah.
on which one it is, they love it, but they're so engaged with technology,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like maybe sports are going to be left behind because there's so many
Mm,
other things going on in the world. So I think that to be able to bring technology into sports or athletics in some way might help draw people back into,
mm,
maybe I don't want to say that they're dying, but they're definitely not as centered anymore on doing those things. You know what I mean? For
yeah.
a young kid that
That's
wanted
an
to grow up
interesting
playing
point.
hockey, that's all they did, ate and slept
Right.
those events. And I'm sure it was the same for dance, but I feel like there's so many options now that it just
Yeah.
makes kids look at things differently, right? So are we going to take a hit on how high our athletes perform at, or is there going to be a smaller amount of athletes hitting those milestones?
Mm,
You know what I mean? Um, we're only at the beginning of it. What challenges do you face pursuing 2 very time intense careers?
mm.
One in your professional career and one in dancing.
I would say the hardest one for sure was sort of in my 20s when I was putting in tons of work. Like, like I mean, it was, I can't even, like, every 5 minutes of my day was planned out. It was super intense. Yeah, I was very driven and not knowing if it was going to work out. Being like, I don't know if I'm shooting myself in both feet because everyone's saying that doing both is impossible
Hmm.
and doing physics at Harvard is pretty damn hard and being a ballerina is really hard. And like doing like I was putting in tons of work and just being like, I don't know if this is gonna work out. And I went through so many auditions and got rejected and it was just there were times where I was like, that part for sure was the hardest. And there are times, I mean, now that I've gone over that, I think I'm like, oh, everything works out. So, I still face times when, I'm doing a weird path that I don't, people haven't done before. So it's like not like I can ask advice, being like, oh, like fellow physicist ballerina doing dancing with robots, could you please tell me what I should do? Right? Like it is very much being like, I think this is what I should do. I don't know. I say yes to some things. I say no to some things. I have no idea. Um, but so there are the doubts still now, but I think having gone through the years of doubts and the really hard work earlier, that was the hardest part. And now it's like, it's okay. I'll end up somewhere. It's fine.
I think that comes with almost with confidence where you're just like, oh, it'll work out. And you're like, some people, well, how is it going to work? I don't know. It's just going to work out.
Yeah. But I
I
think confidence comes with experience, right? Where you're like, I don't know. There are enough times where the plane's been delayed and canceled, but we get there in the end. It's gonna
no,
work
it's
out.
very true. It's very true. When you
Yeah.
started saying that, my mind went somewhere because I
Mm.
talked to my kids and I'm like, if this is what you want to do, then you need to focus on it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you did two things, like you said, that are very,
Hmm.
very challenging. And it's hard to keep people positive and motivated and committed when they
Mm.
fail at one thing.
Yeah.
Because when they're all in on that sport and they still, maybe don't make the team or they get cut or they lose the game, it's easy for them to fall back and be like, well, I tried my hardest. Or maybe that's, what we've taught them. As long as you try your hardest, it's going to be okay. Which I'm not
Right.
saying
Right.
that that's the case. Sometimes it's not okay, even if you try your hardest. You need to
Yeah.
really put in the work. But to get rejection and
Hmm.
be like, you know what, maybe if I wouldn't have put in those extra 5 hours in study hall
Yeah.
yesterday and practiced my ballet, I might have made that. How do you keep yourself motivated in that scenario? Because you've got two very intense things
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
think it would be easy in your case to be like, I didn't make it because I'm dedicating half my life to getting my PhD in a very challenging subset. Does
Right.
that make sense? Like, I feel like the
Yeah.
commitment would have had to be times two to stay motivated on some days to keep them
I
both
was very
going.
tired a lot of the time. That's for sure. Um, yeah, for sure. But I do think the benefit was that there was very kind of different activities. So when I was mentally drained, like there's only so much you can do. Like you can only read a physics book really intensely. I
Mhm.
mean, like 5 hours, like a day. I mean, eight, like that's like crazy. So once you're like mentally, like brain cells, there are no more brain cells like awake in the brain. Then, then I would go dance, and I would also be like, oh my god, I just want to dance. I don't want to think. I just and move. And then I'd get so exhausted or have blisters or something where I'm like, I just want to sit and curl up and read a physics book. So at least the two kind of complemented each other, and they were so extreme that they would want me to like I just crawl to the other one when I was like, so exhausted, like from reading physics or doing lab experiment. I'd like crawl into the dance studio and vice versa. It's how I got like gave myself energy, and yeah,
That,
so
that
they
that's
helped.
that's interesting you say that. I was thinking this morning, like what I do when I'm like completely mentally drained, and I was like, those days I literally grab my iPad, answer emails that I haven't answered for a long time,
Hmm.
shut my phone off, and watch podcasts for the entire day on people that I
Hmm.
find super interesting. And like for a few minutes, there's like a layer of guilt where you're like, do you really have time to sit on the TV or sit on the couch and
Yeah.
watch TV all day? But the how much I get refreshed from
Yeah.
that day of separating myself
Hmm.
from it, it
Yeah.
seems like
Yeah.
it's so needed. And it finally like dawned on me, like, what's my recharge? Uh,
Mm.
how do I recharge? And it finally dawned on me that that's something that I fall back to unconsciously all the
Yeah.
time. And I guess maybe that's what dance was for you.
Completely.
For young ladies,
Hmm.
that uh, I feel like they have a very challenging world ahead of them right now, just with everything going on in the
Yeah.
world. How do you, what's some advice you can give to them to stay committed to their art or what they want to do? Especially with so much stuff going on right now.
I think it's a reminder that they can, well, to do it in their own time and their own way. Like, I think there's so much pressure sometimes to show brilliance immediately, like overnight. And that if you don't show brilliance right away, then like it's not meant for you. And
I'm guilty of that. I was looking at my daughter's cheerleading. I'm like, "Oh, maybe you should focus on figure skating. You're really good at figure skating. I think that's your thing." So I'm guilty of that. I'm going to say that right now. I'm guilty of what you just said.
Yeah, I mean it's, but also as like the parent or those around, like you want to see them happy and successful. So like it's hard not to have those thoughts. But yeah, so I would tell them being like, look, do it in your own way, in your own time. Like the way that I learned physics was very different, and it just meant it would just take me. I just knew I had to like separate myself and go hide in a room and just be in the submarine mode and do it in my own way. Um, and I think that that's sometimes, yeah, that's sometimes quite hard.
Well, I definitely owe my daughter an apology because I literally had this talk with her about 2 weeks ago. Like, Jadian, you're really good at figure skating, and cheerleading's tough. Maybe we should just focus on figure skating. And she's like, I love cheerleading. I'm like, okay, kind of thing. You're good at figure skating, but thank you from myself for
Uh,
looking at that differently. Um, One of the other things that I wanted to ask is maybe what some advice would be to students who are following a very unconventional career
mhm,
path and
mhm.
how to stay motivated there because
Um,
I don't think there's too many physics students that have a side hobby of being a professional dancer by any means. Um,
well, it's definitely, yeah. My heart goes out to like it's hard when there's so much pressure and expectation and stereotypes that you're trying to battle along with something that's quite hard. Right. Um, I think, yeah, it's just like have to be so clear on your North Star. I write down all my North Stars so that there's clarity for myself. And it's, yeah, it's just a reminder that, like, at the end of the day, it's your life, like, no, that you're living. So it's, you just can't make everyone happy at all. And, but you can make yourself happy. So
no, that's very
you
good.
just have to be very, yeah, clear on that and strong and a bit stubborn and a bit rebellious and willing to not make everyone happy. Um, and yeah, I definitely
So while you
had
were
to do that.
saying that,
Yeah.
my mind went somewhere on the topic of work life balance.
Hmm.
And, you know, typically I think now with younger
Right.
generations, they're like, oh, well, it's really important to have this work life balance. But
Mm.
clearly, you just spent the last 20
Yeah.
minutes talking about how there was really no balance. It was
Yeah.
dancing and uh, your education, and that was your
Hmm.
life. Where do you feel like work life balance comes into play? Do you believe in it? Is it something that you try and make happen now that you've, been
Mm.
successful in your career? How do you think, young kids or young adults that have this giant hill to climb,
Right.
how do you feel like that term falls and how successful can you be with that being the forefront of your
Yeah. It's super
approach?
tough. I mean, it's like, well, because I think it's relative to everyone, right? Of, someone who's like a work-life balance, I think is, yeah, it's totally relative to everyone. Because for someone, it's like 30 minutes is a great recharge, and some people are like, they need 3 days, right? So, um, I definitely am a believer in joy. So, like, I find so much joy in my work, but also if I'm gonna like recharge, like I'll go out, like I'm into like salsa and bachata dancing or something that's like joyful or hanging out with friends and like making sure that if I'm having balance, it's very joyful balance. Um, it's, but I also grew up hearing my dad saying like, if you want to be the best at something, you have to work harder than everyone else. So it's like it just depends. Yeah, if you want to be really, really good, you have to work harder than everyone else. Like you have to work really hard. Um, but if you're okay, like being good
Just
and
good.
having more balance, but like it just it depends what gives you more joy, right? Like, and and sometimes it's like different eras in one's life. So I'm not as crazy as I was in my 20s. Like every 5 minutes aren't planned out, and I'm a lot more spontaneous because I find value in where the randomness takes me. But um, yeah, but I do tell my students, like who are undergraduates, I do tell them, I'm like, work hard now because you'll just get lazier as you get older. So like, buckle down and and really work hard now.
I like how you touched on joy there at the beginning of that. I've never approached things like you said it, but
Mm.
you said that dancing brought you joy and physics brings you joy. I love doing my job, and my wife thinks that I work way too much, but to me, and I do these podcasts because I want to learn more from people in different areas to try and make my businesses better, my personal lives better, my kids' lives better.
Yeah.
And that's why I do these things, just because I am a leech to understanding. I feel
Yeah,
like
I
the
can
more I
tell
can
you're like
learn,
driven by passion for it, which is really,
I literally was
yeah.
coming, when they first, I said this to you, when they first pitched this at me, I'm like, this brings no value to what I'm trying to figure out. And then they like, I'm like, read me the questions that I'd ask. And they read it to me and I'm like, no, this isn't, I'm like,
Mm.
give me her LinkedIn. And I looked at it. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to talk to this person. It was just so fascinating, just like looking at it and going through your website. And I'm going to put a link to your website. Just the pictures are so amazing. And
Oh, thank you.
to do it, and I'll share some of the links to your videos. It's so interesting to watch and just see people take a different approach to something. And nobody would have said, hey, you know what, somebody's going to build a business dancing with robots 10 years ago.
Even
Nobody.
4 years ago, when I asked first to rent a robot, they were like, or to loan like, yeah, to borrow a robot, they were like, we've looked at the market. Like, the market for people dancing with robots is zero. And now they're like, and I see like there are a lot more people trying to dance with robots, and it's now a thing. Great.
A thing that you created. And what was the creative process the first time that you know built a dance or choreographed a
Hmm.
dance? What was the thought process of that? You're like, okay, I'm going to do this move and the robot's
Mm,
going to do that.
yeah,
Like, what was, because
it was.
the
Yeah,
moves aren't as elegant either, right? Like,
it's actually quite elegant. And like it's very smooth. But when I first started, I was like, I have no idea if this is gonna work. But it's pandemic. I'm just gonna lock myself in this room from 8 a.m. to midnight, and we're just gonna see what happens. And at first it was like the Michael Jackson, like just the hip. I was like, maybe we can just do the hip thrust. And then we made it a little bit more complicated, and it just kept getting more complicated. I used to love puzzles as a kid, so it kind of felt like I was like, it's this thing with no arms and no legs, but like, can we like make it like, what? It's like a Rubik's thing. It's like, how do we make this work
do you
as a
spend
dance
more
form?
time programming the robot's choreography than
Mm.
you do learning your own? What takes more work?
Definitely the finessing the robot choreography, because I think what people gravitate towards, at least in the videos that I've published, is the musicality. So I think I don't think people notice exactly what it is, but for me, I spend hours and hours and hours. Like, I can spend 7 hours on a 15-second thing just doing the musicality, um, because there's more emotion and feeling if something's like super fast and then elongated and then you speed up, and then like it's the timing and the tempo and the changing rhythm that I think adds that kind of personality and adds the um, mystery to the robot. Like if I was constantly like a on a like a 8 count, it'd be very boring. So it's the
Right.
tweaking of the musicality which takes me forever. And I'll like do it. I'll test if it's like I'm like 0.07 seconds. No point. No, it's like 0.7 seconds or 0.8 seconds. Okay, and then I go back and then like I'm literally changing things by 0.1 seconds.
And how do you select the music? And like, there's got to be a process for everything, right? Because you can't just
Yeah,
take a piece of music and be like, oh, this is going to work. A robot can dance this. Like, or do you think a robot could dance to any song?
yeah. I'm like a robot can do. It's like whatever I'm in the mood for. I'm like, oh, I don't want Lana Del Rey. I want Michael Jackson. I want something else.
Well, I'm 100% fascinated and I have 100 more questions, but I'm always trying to be mindful of everybody's time. I always say that we're going to do this in 30 minutes and we didn't. But what I like
Yeah.
to end on is
Mhm.
a question on networking. How important do you think your network has been in your advancement and growth in what you're doing now and throughout your career?
Immensely important. And the funny thing is, like, most of my 20s, I was in a windowless lab in a dance studio. So I was like building myself and
Mhm.
building what I do. Um, but I've always said yes, and I've always been open to things. So, for instance, 3 to 4 years ago, when I first posted a dancing with a robot on LinkedIn, someone reached out and wanted to jump on a call, and I said sure. And we jumped on a call, and we were going to do some augmented reality project, which didn't pan out. But 4 years later, I'm now behind the scenes at the Olympics because of that call 4 years ago, and just having said yes. And so it's just like it's the most I think it's just I know everyone's into this, say no to things, but I'm a yes
I,
girl. I
I I
just
don't know how to say no to anything,
I'm
and
just saying I'm a yes girl, and I think like it's the randomest things that work out. Like it's like I don't know, like that Louis Vuitton gig happened because of some weird. I just said yes to some weird little thing.
I nothing, and not everything good always comes from saying yes, but nothing good ever comes from saying no. So,
Yeah.
but Dr. Merritt Moore, I am smarter today because of you, and I am so blessed that you said yes to coming on the podcast with me, and I can't wait to have another conversation with you.
Thank you so much for this. It's been a really fun conversation. Thank you.
I look forward to it, and have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Talk soon.